Start this lesson. All right, here we go. This is pre-algebra lesson 7.8, simple and compound interest. I'm going to show you how to do both simple and compound interest. The only thing I'm going to make you know how to do is simple interest, but that's the basic gist. Okay, so here's the deal. Let me explain to you the difference between simple and compound interest, okay? I just want you to understand the concept right now. Are you listening? I want you to understand the concept right now, so pay attention. Just watch, you're just looking. We're going to use simple numbers, numbers that you can wrap your brain around. $1,000. So here's the deal. Here's the bank, okay, here's the bank, and you have $1,000 that you want to put in the bank. Does that make sense? If there is simple interest, this is what it means. If they're going to pay you 10% simple interest, it means that you're going to make interest on the original investment only. Okay, this is what I mean by that. If the bank's going to give me 10% interest, 10%, how much money are they going to give me? What's 10% of 1,000? $100. So that means that each year they're going to give me $100 for putting money in the bank. Does that make sense? So at the end of the year, I'm going to have $1,100. Does that make sense? They're not going to actually write me a check for $100. What they're going to do is they're just going to put it in the bank. They're going to leave it in the bank. And now I'm going to have, at the end of 1 year, I'm going to have $1,100. Does that make sense? If I was to leave it in there for 2 years, I would have $1,200. If I was to leave it there for 5 years, I would have $1,500. Does that make sense? Each year, I would add $100 because that's how much they're paying me. They're going to pay me interest on the original amount each year. Does that make sense? Okay. So here's the chart. This is what it would look like. The original investment is $1,000. After 1 year, after the original investment is $1,000. After 1 year, you have 1,000. How much? 1,100. After 2 years, I would have 1,200. After 5 years, I would have 1,500. Make sense? After 10 years, what would I have?
2,000.
I would have 2,000. I would have doubled my money. Does that make sense? Okay. This is called simple interest. Okay, that's simple interest. Okay, now, hold on. The formula for simple interest is interest. This is the one I showed you yesterday. Interest equals principal times rate times time. That's simple interest, okay? We'll come back to that. That's the one you're going to need to know for your homework tonight. It's the one you're going to need to know for your test on Friday, etc. Makes sense? You will need to know that formula, but we'll get to that. Now, let's try to remember this. Try to remember this. Look here. Remember this, that in 10 years, I doubled my money. Agreed? Using simple interest at 10%, in 10 years, I doubled my money. Now I'm going to show you the basic gist of compound interest, okay? Okay, so here's the deal. Let me explain to you how to do compound interest. I'm not going to show you the formula because I'm not going to make you know it, but I'm going to show you the difference. See, banks use compound interest. They don't use simple interest. When they give you money, they give you money compound interest. What it means is that, okay, here's my initial investment of $1,000, right? That's how much I started with. So I started with 1,000. After 1 year, at 10%, after 1 year, I still have 1,100. Does that make sense? I mean, 1 year, I made 10%. I now have 1,100. The second year, I'm making interest not on my original $1,000, but I'm making it on 1,100. Does that make sense? So after 2 years, I'm not doing 10% of 1,000. I'm doing 10% of 1,100. Well, what's 10% of 1,100? Is 110. I made an extra $10 that year because I made interest on my interest. Does that make sense? So now I add 110, so I add 110. The first year is this. The next year, it would be 1,210. I made an extra $10. After 3 years, from the end of the second year to the end of the third year, I don't make interest on $1,000. I'm making interest on 1,210. So this time I'm actually making $121. right? So that would be 1,331. Does that make sense? Now listen, this is compound. And here, I'll do simple over here. Simple is over here. This would be 1,100. This would be 1,200. This is 1,300. Do you see so far which one, if you were going to ask the bank, could you give me either simple or compound interest, which one are you going to ask for?
Compound.
Compound. You get more money, right? Because you're making interest on your interest. Make sense? The fourth year, I'm making an extra $133. So what's 1,331 plus 1,464, and this would be 1,400. The fifth year, I'm making an extra $146. So then that would be 1,600, and there's 1,500. So by year 5, I've made an extra $100.
Wow.
You see what I'm talking about? I mean, compound interest. This is where I hope you can see all of a sudden things start getting crazy here. This is why people invest in retiring. And if you can, you want to start when you're 20. Because by the time you're 70, you've been doing this for 50 years. And next thing you know, I mean, here's the deal. I'm 43. I just turned 43. I can't believe I'm 43. I'm 43. I've been saving since I was 20. I only saved like $100 a month in my retirement. You know what? When I'm 70, as long as the stock market does what it's been doing over the history of its time, I will be a millionaire. I'll have $1 million in the bank. And I'm just a lowly Christian school teacher. And yet I'll have $1 million. Because of? Because of what? Compound interest, right? I'm letting my money work for me. Does that make sense? My money is working for me. Every year, I'm making money on the money I made last year, which is also making money on the money I made the year before. I mean, I'm compounding this, right? My money is working for me. That's investing. That's compound interest. That's what people hope to do when they put money in the stock market or there's money market accounts and etc. Anyway, we're not talking about investing. I just wanted to show you the difference. And I'll tell you right now that by the time after 10 years, I will have, remember with simple interest, we doubled our money. After 10 years, we will have made, it would have been like 2,500 instead of 2,000. That's an extra $500. It's huge. Yeah.
What does the stock market have to do with it?
Yeah, nothing. Yeah, we're not that. You come take money management. I'll talk to you about that. Okay. Anyway, so here's the deal. We need to be able to do this. We're going to use the simple interest formula, which is interest. I means interest, right? Equals PRT. You need to understand what these words are. This is interest. I equals interest. P means principal. Do you understand? Does anybody here know what the word principal means when you're talking about banking? Principal is how much money you start with. Okay? How much money you start with. So in our example before, when you put money in the bank, what would be the principal?
1,000.
1,000. So here, let's do our little formula here. Okay, you're all going to need a calculator. So go ahead and pull that out. I'll wait. So here's the deal. In this situation, I want to know interest is how much money I would have at the end of however many years, right? So remember, what did I say? I showed you the deal. After 10 years, how much money were we going to have? How much money would we have? In simple interest, remember? After 10 years, 2,000, right? So let's just see if that's true using the formula. So, interest, that's the thing we want to know. I want to know how much money I've made. So we're going to go interest equals principal. How much money did we start with? 1,000. Makes sense? We started with that. Times the rate. R is the rate. Rate is what percent interest were they giving me? 10%. How do I write 10% as a decimal? 0.1, right? Or 0.1, right? And then times that by, I'm going to write an X here just to make this real easy. And then I'm going to say how much, the T is the time. How many years am I going to be saving for?
10.
10 years times 10 years. There it is. Interest, my interest equals the principal, 1,000, times the rate, 10%, times time, 10 years. Let's see what that comes out to. What does 1,000 times 0.1 times 10 come out to?
100.
Nope. 1,000. 1,000. So that means that my interest equals 1,000. That's how much money I made. How much money do I have in the bank?
2,000.
2,000.
You add them
Does that make sense? This was the original. This is how much money I made. If I said how much money do you now have in the bank, you have to add the interest to your original principal, and that's how much money you have. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's try another one. Let's do this. Let's say that. Let's say you start with. Here's the deal. We'll make an easy one. Find me the interest. If the principal equals $250, this would be something like for you guys. If you guys were just open a bank account and right now $250, and the interest rate, the R is 4%, and the time is 3 years. I want to know how much interest I would make if this stuff is true. Use the simple interest formula, which is interest equals principal times rate times time. Did you guys figure it out? So then the interest, how much money you made, equals, what's the principal? 250. What is the rate? 0.04, right? Times 0.04 times, what's the time? 3 years. What if I had said 6 months? What would you put down for time then? If I said, how much would you make it? It would be half, right? What about 3 months? What would you put down?
0.3. Wait. 0.25.
That's a quarter. 3 months is 1/4 of a year, so you'd put 0.25, right? Just, Anyway, what is 250 times 0.4 times 3 on a calculator? What is that?
30.
$30. So the interest on $250 is $30. If I was to ask you the interest, you'd say it's $30. After 3 years, you have an extra $30. Woo! Right? What if I was to ask you how much money would you have in the bank after 30 years? After 3 years, what would you say? 280. Does that make sense? Know the question. Make sure you understand the question. Here's another one. And, do this one. The principal, same thing. The principal is $250. The rate is 3.5%. And the time is 6 months. So this is something that would be realistic for you guys, right? You have $250. You want to go put it in the bank. And a 3.5% interest rate, you wouldn't get anywhere near that right now. Right now, the interest rate's like 1.5%, but whatever. And how much money would you have in the bank after 6 months? So that's what we're going to do right here. See if you can figure it out. What's the formula?
Interest equals principal times rate times time.
We're looking for the interest. That's what they're asking for. What's the principal? 250 times. How do you do 3.5%?
0.035.
How do you do 6 months?
0.5.
What does it come out to?
4.375.
So what is 4.375 even mean?
4.38.
What does it mean? 4.38. What does that mean?
It's $4 and change.
How much?
$4.30 or 37. Because it's all the gas.
So it's $4.38 or $4.37. That is money, right? We're talking about interest here. So that means that if you had $250 and you put it in the bank at 3.5% interest rate and you left it there for 6 months, you would earn $4.38. Does that make you want to keep it in the bank for 6 months? No. It's not enough money. You're like, I'd rather spend it.
I don't get how 6 would be 2, 0.5.
It's 6 months, half a year. If it was 1 year, you multiply by 1.
Oh, yeah.
But 6 months is half a year, so you do a 0.5, right? 3 months is a quarter of a year, which is why you put 0.25. Make sense? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to show you one other thing. This is not, they don't ask you to do this. I'm going to show you. I want you to do it. I want you to do this. If my interest I earned, the interest I earned was $100, okay? And I started with $5,000. No, we'll say this. I start with $2,500. Okay, this was my principal. Okay, principal, and I left it in the bank for 2 years. I want to know what was my rate. I want to know what my rate was. So I'm asking you for the rate. What should your formula look like? What should the first letter of the formula look like now when you do this?
R.
R equals, right? You have to take the simple interest formula and move stuff around. See if you can do it.
Oh.
Look, what's the interest formula? The simple interest formula? What is the simple interest formula?
I equals P times R times T.
What am I going to solve for? What am I trying to find?
R.
I want the rate. So I got to shove everything else out of there, right? It needs to say R equals, right? Doesn't it need to say R equals? Okay. So then you're going to go, is the R happy right now?
No.
What's going on? He's being multiplied by
P.
PNT. Divide this side by PT. Divide this side by PT, right? Those guys are gone. That leaves me with the rate equals interest over principal times time. Plug this stuff in, people. What is the interest? How much did I make? 100. What is the principal? 2,500 times, what is the time? 2. Is that simplified? No. What is 2,500 times 2? 5,000. Rate equals 100 over 5,000. What is 100 divided by 5,000? Put it in the calculator.
0.02.
Oh, so it's 0.02. What does 0.02 mean if I'm looking for the rate?
Percent.
So how do I write that? How do I write that as a percent?
You move the decimal over to the
So
right
what's the
side.
percent?
2%.
2%. The rate in this situation was 2%. Does that make sense? Did you watch me do that? I moved things around and then you plugged it in. You just did it. If you have all the information except for one, that's when you use a formula, right? And you isolate the thing you need, kick everybody else out, and solve it. Make sense? They don't make you do that. They just leave it with the interest at the beginning, which is silly. But next year you get a lot more complicated stuff. So anyway, I'll give it to you now. Your homework. We have no school on Monday. I bet you think I'm not excited about that. You'd be wrong. Okay, page 385. You're doing number 1, 2, 11, 12. I'm not done. 1 and 2. 11, 12, 15. $21. Okay, that sounds good. Those 6 problems. Okay, did you write them all down? All 6? Okay.
Wait,